I think that the subject matter itself really unnerves people. But there's just no two ways about it that if we're writing about like sexual abuse and violence, I just really can't sugarcoat what happened in their lives. I was the narrator for the audiobook. It's
Oh,
very relentless, I think in a good, really propulsive way. But like, I had this guy was my audiobook editor, and I don't think he knew anything about like any of this. He was just a dude.
oh,
And he'd
right.
be like, can we take a break? So
Oh
it
my
is like
God.
very intense, but it mirrors the intensity of their lives.
Welcome to The Stacks, a podcast about books and the people who read them. I'm your host, Tracy Thomas, and we are joined today by award-winning independent journalist and author Justine Leun to talk about her newest book, Unreasonable Women: 3 Stories of Violence, Imprisonment, and Extraordinary Survival. The book is based on 7 years of reporting, research, and responses from more than 1,000 incarcerated women, and it explores the ways the legal system criminalizes victims of domestic abuse, focusing on the stories of 3 women who had to kill their abusers to survive. Today, Justine and I talk about how she went about conducting her survey, what she was looking for in her 3 main subjects, and how she thought about herself in relationship to objectivity and her audience as a journalist. Our book club pick for June is The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho, and we'll be discussing that book with Mary H.K. Choi on Wednesday, June 24th. Everything we talk about on each episode of The Stacks is linked in our show notes. If you like this podcast, if you want more bookish content and community, consider joining the Stacks Pack on Patreon and subscribing to my newsletter Unstacked on Substack. In each of these places, you get different perks, including bonus episodes, access to our virtual book club, my hot takes, and so much more. And more than that, you get to know that your support makes it possible for me to make this podcast every single week. To join the Stacks Pack, head to patreon.com/the stacks. And to subscribe to my newsletter, go to tracythomas.substack.com. All right, and now it's time for my conversation with Justine Leun. All right, everybody, I'm very excited. As you all know, when I book people on this show, sometimes I hear about a book and I book a guest because I've heard about the book and I think it's going to be good. And sometimes people pitch me and I'm like, yeah, that sounds interesting. And then sometimes I start a book and I'm like, I love this so much, I must speak to the author. And today's guest is that third type of book. I am so excited. I am joined by Justine Leun. Her brand new book is called Unreasonable Women. It is about women who are incarcerated for murder under dire circumstances. It is fantastic, and I am thrilled to welcome Justine to the Stacks. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you so much. What a warm welcome. Truly.
I'm thrilled. This book is like such a me book. You knocked it out of the park. I loved it. I want you to tell people in like 30 seconds or so what the book is really about, because I sort of did a shitty job. I feel like you have a better pitch than me.
I'm not sure I do, but I can just tell that I really am not sure. I know that you're supposed to have an elevator pitch. My Unreasonable Women is about the phenomenon of criminalized survival, largely, which is when people, and it's usually women or girls, react to abuse or assault and are subsequently arrested, prosecuted, and often incarcerated for many years. That's criminalized survival. And I tell that story through unique data that I collected over many years from over 1,000 women in prison, and through the deeply reported stories of 3 women, Tanisha, TC, and Gemma.
Yes. So this is one of those books, people, where you get the whole big story told through 3 people, which is, again, one of my absolute favorite nonfiction constructs. You mentioned your unique research. I need you to tell the people about it. This is the part of the book. It happens in the introduction where you sort of lay this out for us. And I was like, oh shit, this is the book. Like, at first I wasn't sure. I was like, I don't know if I need a book about women in prison. And then you explained how you got us here. So can you kind of set up for the people how you came to write this book, and then what you did with the surveys?
Yeah, and I'll say that it's a book about women in prison, but I really think and hope that it's really just a book about women and violence in America told through these stories of women in prison. Quickly, what I did was I got myself involved in reporting on this one story, the story of Nikki Adamando in upstate New York. She was a young mom who was abused quite severely by her partner, had a lot of documentation of it, fought back one night, and was just absolutely demolished by a prosecutor and sentenced to 19 years to life by a judge. And I reported on that story, and I knew like everything about that story because I got so much access. And I just knew it was just really weird to sit in a court and know, I don't know the 100% truth, but to know that she was abused, to know that she, highly likely that she defended herself, and then to see a totally different story spun. And so after that happened, and after Nikki got 19 to life, I just thought, well, Nikki is like white and small, and she's a preschool teacher. Well, she's a stay-at-home mom, and she has all this evidence, and like she had, maybe not the best lawyers in the whole wide world, but not the worst either. She's outside of Manhattan, and she has, in this sort of middle-class human community. So if this happens to Nikki, like, what is this happen? What's going on? And then when I talked to advocates and lawyers and formerly incarcerated women, everyone said, oh, yeah. Like, we all know, like literally everyone who works with women's prisons knows that they're just full of Nikkis. That's who we lock up. That's what we do.
And full of Nikkis, meaning women who were abused or in abusive situations who finally fought back or stood up for themselves or said no to their abusers and then became the criminal.
Or just, somehow didn't die in a situation.
Yeah, somehow they survived. And that's the criminalized survival.
And that's the criminalized survival. So it was just full of women like that. We all know that, sure. And I said, well, great. So where's the numbers? And everyone said, well, there's no numbers because, as soon as you get convicted in a court, that's the fact. Like those are the facts of the matter. That is what we understand as the truth, and that's the true story. So now the true story that follows these women is always, she's a murderer. That's her conviction, that's her felony, and that's what she is. And there's no way for them to break through that because that's the accepted story. But I talked to an attorney in Illinois who works on cases like this, and I was saying, so how do I prove it? How do I report on how enormous the problem is? She said, well, you could just ask the women. And I was like, oh, okay. I love asking people stuff. It's like, what do I do? How would I do that? She said, you just send them letters. And I was like, well, how hard could that be? She just said, get their names and send them letters. That's a great idea. I would love to do that. I had a friend at the time whose name is Tanya Sanchez. She used to be a political science professor at Yale. And she had done some data, just helping me for some immigration reporting I was doing. I said, Tanya, could you help me out? Could we make some way to assess what these women's backgrounds are, some way to communicate, a survey or something? She said, sure, come over. We'll just do it. So I went over, sat on the floor of her apartment, and we did it. We made this really simple survey. And then I started FOIA-ing states or asking public information officers for all the women in the state convicted of murder or manslaughter serving time. And then I thought, what have I done? What have I done? Because now I started sending out the letters, and I thought when I started, genuinely, I thought stamps were 29 cents. It had been so long. I think I went to a post office in 1996. That was the last time.
Right.
So then I found out they're 55 cents, and I think now they're 65 cents, something. And then I realized it was this whole cost involved, but I was really committed. And then I realized you can't put stickers on envelopes because they're going to have drugs on them. So the prison systems think, so you have to handwrite it. I didn't know how to print it out on a printer. So I started handwriting. And then I wanted to respect the women and make them think it was, as personal as it could be. So I started to write Dear Tracy, Right. But once I did it on the first 100, I had to do it on the next 100. Right. And then, so I ended up sending out 10,000 letters.
Oh my God.
To
How long did that part take you? Just the printing, packaging, sealing.
The process was a few years. I think I got them all out fairly soon. I think I went into a kind of fugue state, and I was it was also over COVID. So, I did have my 2 kids, but I also didn't have to do anything other than just this work really. So I did that and got them back. And I just became really fixated on getting 1,000 letters because I just thought he said, she said is so strong that I just wanted 1,000 she saids
Right.
to sort of counter anybody saying
Right.
like, this isn't what's happening. I just thought if I can get 1,000. So I did write to basically every name I got. A lot of names I didn't get. Some states just said no, some states blocked me. But yeah, and then I got over 1,000 letters back, and they form sort of the three women were that I report on are three women that wrote back. But also all of the qualitative and quantitative research kind of forms the infrastructure for the larger or the more deeply reported stories.
And aside from like name, sentence length, racial background, age, what kind of things were you trying to get answered? What were the questions that you were the most curious about?
So because we didn't want to prime them, we never asked the questions I was most curious about
Sure.
outright. But a lot of what I asked was kind of like, can you tell me about your relationship with the person you're convicted of killing? Can you tell me about the days leading up to what happened? Tell me a little bit about yourself that would help explain why you're here, your truth as you see it. And those, particularly, I would say question 16, which was around sort of, which I think I often thought of as like question 16. It's about question 16, because that's the one where I sort of asked, like, why do you think, like, what led you here, more or less, I asked. And so sometimes people answered very shortly, but a lot of people also wrote quite a lot about what they believed had led them to where they were.
As I was reading the book, I didn't know anything about you. I didn't know anything about these women. And you start with Nikki's case as like how you just started today. So I sort of assumed that she was going to be one of the three people, and she's not. So you picked three different people. How did you pick them, and why did you not want to tell Nikki's story in the book as much? She's in the book, but she's not a main subject.
Nikki's sister wrote a memoir called Dear Sister, and I'd done the podcast on her story.
Yeah.
I'd done her story. Like her story had been, I mean, she's never written her story, but like her story had been covered. And the reason that she's actually in the start is it became clear to me, I got some feedback. I think I started with Tanisha in my first drafts. I was advised that people might need an easier way into the topic than Tanisha. And I do think that Nikki is always a much easier way into the topic. Not that there's literally nothing easy about her story ever. But
Right.
It seems to be a story that helps people get into the concept of criminalized survival and, care about it and understand it in a really sort of clear way. And then we went to Tanisha. And Tanisha was my first main subject. And I think she's kind of, I don't know, my husband read the book recently. He's never read the actual book until maybe a month ago. He said it's clear that like your greatest connection is with Tanisha, and people have their different people that they connect with, but for me she was always the start. So I had picked her case. To me was really a perfect case because she had testified for the prosecution for the state to make a case. That meant that also all the documentation that I could find was like the state's documentation. Right. So it was kind of a perfect inarguable argument. Like you could not say that the things didn't happen because it's all just the state's version of events. So there's a lot of backup for that, for her story, and a lot of analysis to be made. And then once I chose her, because her story is about, she was forced to take part in a crime, then I wanted also someone a little bit more like Nikki who had a straight self-defense case, because that's such a big part of criminalized survival. And Gemma had that straight self-defense case. And once we had Gemma and Tanisha, I remember once my editor and I sitting there going like, because we had found a few options for the third person, but they just didn't quite work. You need someone really specific if you're reporting back and forth with someone in prison as well. They need to be so verbal and communicative and into the project, because you cannot go in their car with them and hang out with them. You have to be really talking with them. So we needed someone like very good at communication. We wanted somebody from like, we sort of made up this, we were laughing at how ridiculous our wish list was for this person. Like we want like this person who would like, and we joked about it. And then within a couple weeks, looking through the piles, I had a research assistant had flagged this one woman and was like, this is an amazing story. And I looked at this woman, TC, and I pulled out her, 26-page letter that she'd written me that was brilliant.
Mhm.
And I was like, does this hit every mark that my
Wow.
editor and I thought of as our ideal third person? We also wanted someone that spoke to like the childhood trauma element, and she killed her abusive stepfather. So it was just those three fit really well into the main points that I wanted to
Yeah.
hit on the topic.
I, on this show, have had the pleasure of talking to many journalists who write books that follow subjects that are difficult topics. Brian Goldstone, who you know, Andrea Elliott, Roxana Asgharian. Like I said, your book fits into a kind of book that I personally just love. However, every time I have someone like that on the show, we have to talk about some of the stickier parts of doing this kind of reporting. And that is sort of like your relationship to the work as a journalist, your relationship to your own, not that there's a broader objectivity, but your responsibility as a journalist as you see it. So I guess I have a series of questions sort of in this vein. And my first one is sort of like, you're pretty involved in these women's lives. I listened to the Nikki podcast. You're very close with her. It's clear that you're close with Tanisha. There's a section in the book that we're going to talk about later where she's sort of advising you and like coaching you. And you testified on behalf of her, I believe. Was it her? Yeah. So I'm wondering sort of what's your scaffold for what you are allowed to do, what you aren't allowed to do, how far Justine will get involved, and how much of your involvement you're willing to share with your reader.
I mean, when I'm dealing with people who are living this, right?
Yeah.
I've been reporting on Tanisha's case for years. I'm not like I love her as a person. I'm just telling the truth about what happened. Like this is all documented, and the thornier things. Like, she's not perfect at all, and I'm not trying to hold her up to be. To me, I'm not a J school journalist. I didn't work at the New York Times and New Yorker. Like I kind of taught myself how to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not paying people. I'm not doing anything like that. But if Tanisha has a chance at freedom, which I believe she deserves, and she would like me to say some words as to why I believe, as somebody who's an expert on this case and who knows a lot about the topic, I just feel like as a person, it's kind of crazy for me to be like, well, I'm a journalist, so I can't. And I think, I wouldn't say exactly friends. Like I would say I wouldn't, maybe, but it doesn't feel like that because I'm not going to them I asked Tanisha for advice, but we don't have a two-way relationship
Yeah.
but there is a level of like intimacy where I think that, first of all, I'm just not a very formal person at all. And I'm asking a lot of them to share. And maybe in part it's a technique, like we need to be comfortable with each other.
Yeah.
We need to be comfortable with each other. I think in large part, I'm pretty honest about it with the reader.
Yeah.
I'm very present in the book. I'm not like a mystery of what I think or what I feel or, anything. But I think that I would say that my journalism has a point of view. I believe all journalism has a point of view. I'm just
Yeah.
coming out and telling you what it is.
Yeah.
People have a point of view. You're not writing about these things without one.
Right. Right. Well, that's sort of my second question is like your point of view, your politics, like your beliefs are very clear and they're on display here. And I'm wondering, like, did you worry about the choice to do that because there is a world in which people could discredit your work as like activist journalism in the pejorative, though I personally believe that's like a good thing.
Yeah.
But there is a world where people can discredit what you've done because you sort of said the quiet parts out loud. Did you think about that? Did you and your editor ever worry about that? Or is that not something that is your concern at all?
I don't consider myself an activist journalist at all. Like, I think there's a place for that. But me,
You don't?
I don't. I don't. I'll tell you why. I think when I
Okay.
started out, and I have some more work that I'm doing that I think will prove this out.
Okay.
But I think that I started from an ideological place, which is like an into writing about these issues, which is I read a lot of abolitionist stuff. Like I read about, I read a lot about mass incarceration, obviously like very lefty, right? I dispensed with that like in my reporting. And I think, we might talk about that chapter, but like I really dispensed with the ideology at a certain point because I found when I followed that, a part of me was just wanting to please the people in that space. And whenever I would write like that, the writing would just be bad. Like when I would try to write according to the ideology to like hit the perfect notes that would be correct, I thought it was really boring. And the more and more that I reported on this topic, the less and less any ideology really fit. And I had to just decide, like, am I like for a movement? Like, because I'm not. I'm really first and foremost just want to tell the stories as I see them. So yeah, no, I really, really don't consider myself an activist journalist, though I
I think
know
maybe we
it's
have
funny.
different definitions.
Yeah, what is the
Because I'm
definition?
thinking of it like in my mind, I was thinking of it more as like a journalist who is like trying to persuade the reader towards towards action or towards engagement
But then are
of a
Brian,
kind.
like Brian and
I
Andrea
would say
and
Brian
Roxana would all
is.
be.
I would say Brian definitely is. For
Okay.
sure. For
Right.
sure Brian
Okay.
is. I would not say Roxana is. Only, well, actually, I read that book so long ago. That her conclusion, yes.
I mean, if you define
yes.
Brian that way, then Roxana, and then
I
would
think
not
Roxana
Andrea?
too. Andrea,
Because Andrea
I
would
think Andrea is
would
the least in my mind. And it's not, and I'm not saying it in the pejorative way that people use it as like a weapon. I'm saying it more as like a complimentary way where it's like this journalist goes into this world. Like another example for me would be like Matthew Desmond. Like, I mean, he's very much, I think, and I think he would say, I would assume he would say that he is an activist because I feel like he's done a lot of work around poverty since he wrote Evicted. But I think of it more as like, because like there's a version of this book where you are never in the book. We don't really know what you think, and you're just telling us the information. And I feel like your point of view, and Brian isn't in his book.
no,
Pretty much at all.
Mm-mm.
I can't remember.
Andrea,
exactly,
I don't believe is really. She's very
Andrea is a little bit because
little.
she goes to lunch with them, and it's like while we're out to lunch, while we do this, but. All of that to say is like, I feel like you are because I feel like you are there like sort of guiding us. But I think because we have different definitions, it makes sense why you would say you're not. And in my mind, I feel like I'm like, you are.
I mean, I'll
but in
take
your
it.
definition, you're not.
I mean, I think more, maybe that's interesting because I think what happened is partway through, I was like, I cannot be asked to adhere to the rules of movements.
Sure.
And so maybe I then, so maybe it is or isn't. I guess people can decide, because I certainly have a point of view. But yes, I think at a certain point I was trying to adhere to like all of these ideologies. And I was like, I just don't. And the stories are not, these are human beings, not human arguments, as Brian had said to me a few days ago. And I was like, that's really helpful. That was the truth. And so I guess from then on, I was like, I am not an activist journalist. I am not an activist journalist. So maybe.
But I guess back to the original question, which is like, were you worried that by sort of playing your hand more clearly and like really pretty much stating exactly, not like, you're not like, this is what I believe, but like, it's very clear, like you said, you're in the book. Did it ever become a concern for you that people would diminish your work because of that, or would be able to like diminish these women because of that?
I mean, I suppose they are free to, but I just, I felt like I wanted to be honest with the reader. I don't want to pretend that I don't think something. I just tell you what I think, but it's backed up. And if that, for whatever reason, you don't give it credibility, then okay. I think I just didn't feel another choice. I had to be very like honest in this book. And I guess I just, No, it never really occurred. It never really occurred to me.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's okay.
yeah.
That's totally fine too. What about like the racial dynamics of it? Because as far as I can tell, correct me if I'm wrong, Tanisha's the only Black subject. The other two women and Nikki are all white. And at the end of the book, you share like a lot of your findings from the study, and it's disproportionately Black women who are sentenced longer, I believe, and also are overrepresented in this population. Were you worried that you didn't have like a proper balance, or that there should have been more Black figures? And how did you decide to stick with the balance that you came out with?
So I think that Black women are disproportionately represented in prison, but they're not the majority. So actually, I believe it's 13% of the general population is Black, and then
Black.
it's 30% in women's prisons. I don't know about. I'm
Yeah.
not going to men's prisons.
I think in men, yeah, it's different.
So to that, the three women, it's a third.
Yeah.
TC is a lesbian, and that played a lot into her story, I think. And so,
Yeah.
I thought that was. I didn't pick her for that reason, but I thought that was. But the reality was, like, sure, I would have loved to have the most perfectly balanced represented, but I really needed a lot of things out of the subjects beyond them just as representative of something. I needed them as like people to have these particular cases. And I needed them to just be the type of person that I could work with and that really wanted to work with me. Like that was really, tricky. You just to have people who are really in it. So that I don't know if I did wrong or right, however it was, but that was just how it turned out. And I do think that, I don't know if you feel this way because I haven't read it as a first time reader, but to me Tanisha's case is a bit bigger than the other cases. The story is a bit bigger than the other stories, just a little bit. We tried to get the balance right, but to me, it takes up a bit more space.
Yeah, I would say her story is also just like feels the craziest. And so it feels really sticky. Like in my mind, I would say Tanisha is like takes up the most space, then Gemma, and then TC.
Yeah, that's accurate.
And also that their cases also fit that. Like, though there were many times where I was like, I actually need to get back to Gemma. Like I was like, what? Like, because that's also a crazy story. They're all crazy stories.
Yeah, they are.
TC's. So, we probably should tell people a little bit. So in the case you said before, so in TC's case, she was abused by a stepfather who she ends up killing, who was also abusing her mother. And her and her mother end up being convicted for this murder. In a sort of, and all of these are sort of like in a shady way, like every single one, it's like this happened in a shady way. And by shady, I mean like the courts are shady. Because the thing that you say in the book that I was like, oh my God, how come I've never thought of this is like these women are in search of help and support their whole lives, in need of the system, help. And it's not until they commit these crimes that all of a sudden the full weight of the state is right there with them, but it's against them. And it's well organized. And it's like they've got their shit together. Don't try to file for some service if you need help, because then the bureaucracy is a nightmare. But the moment you commit a crime, all of a sudden you get the best DEA or the best DA ever from the movies is like the star prosecutor. I'm just like, how does this happen? So I found that to be, I think I knew that, but like having you articulate it, I was like, yes, of course. So that's TC. Gemma is she's like sort of middle class, right? She grows up sort of middle class. She's an army kid. She's sexually abused multiple times growing up. She gets in this like accidental relationship sort of with this man.
Yes.
Like bad luck abounds in all of these stories, but she gets in this relationship and he's extremely abusive. They're raising her kids together and it's pretty much like he's abusing her. She finally fights back and she kills him. And then Tanisha's case, like you said, she is involved in a murder at gunpoint, basically at the hands of her sort of
roommate,
ex-roommate.
like a roommate that like rapes her, basically, I think, or
Yeah,
something.
yes.
Yeah.
They're like,
Or
they
beats
are
her.
like domestic partners
They're
in
like
the platonic
not.
sense.
Yeah,
but she's like cleans for him.
he
She
makes
like,
her do everything, but
yes,
she
like
just needed a place to crash.
She needed a place
Yeah.
to live. And I don't know, like, yes, they're roommates.
That's the best.
And
That's the best term I could come up with. It. Your roommate who beats you.
It's very
right.
unclear.
Yeah.
But importantly, he is her abuser.
Yes.
She has had a string of them in her life, and he, for some reason, decides to kill this neighbor, and she walks in, and he's like, "You're gonna help me," and she does. The story. It's like when I say it out loud, I was trying to talk about this book with my mom yesterday. I was trying to explain what happened. And I was like, I don't know. Can you just read it? Because when I say it, it sounds dumb. But when you read it, it's like, holy shit. All of these stories. Because there's so many little nuggets along the way. It's not like the kinds of true crime stories where it feels very clear and linear. Especially Tanisha and TC, I would say, are both sort of like kind of convoluted. Is that fair?
I think Tanisha is complicated, but actually like pretty straightforward what happened, because I've even talked to her roommate, ex-roommate, abuser, whatever, and I've been like, did you like force her to take part in this? And he's like, yeah, like I would have done that. Sounds about right. Like there's no two ways about really what happened. But,
I see.
TC who killed her abusive stepfather, who had been abusing her for her whole life and then was abusing her mom. That is the space in which some confusion exists. It's a long time ago. But I think, I was doing an event with Josie Duffy Rice just a few days ago, and she was saying, like, but the thing is, whatever it was, like, who cares? Like, who cares if it was convoluted? Like, that guy. And I don't necessarily feel that way. But yes, that case is a little bit more. And Gemma's is just straightforward. He broke into her house.
Yeah.
She had, after she said to leave him.
Right.
But yes.
Okay, we're going to take a quick break, and then I want to come back to TC. Summer is finally here. It is my favorite season. There is so much good stuff happening over here at the Stacks. You all know about the podcast. Of course you do. You're listening to it right now. But do you know about the Stacks Pack on Patreon and my newsletter, Unstacked, on Substack? Listening to this show supports the work I do. It goes a super long way. But if you want to go the super duperest, longest, most extra miley way, you should consider supporting us on those platforms. You get perks, and it makes it possible for me to make the show. Plus, between now and September 22nd, any paid member of the Stacks Pack on Patreon or a subscriber to my newsletter gets my nonfiction reading guide. It is 30 nonfiction books that I love. It is exclusive to both of those platforms. And you want it. Plus, it'll be gone come September 22nd. So you've got to join. And in addition to getting the nonfiction reading guide on the Patreon, you've got access to our book club meetups, to our private Discord. You get a bonus episode. You get the mega reading challenge. And then in the newsletter, you can hear me give all of my hot takes on books, pop culture. Every month, I rank every book I read in order from least to most favorite. I'm giving you the inside tea on all of these books. You also get that bonus episode each month. Making this podcast is a collaborative effort, and by supporting the Patreon and the Substack, you allow me to make this podcast alongside my incredible team so they can do what they do best. So if you're looking to meet other bookish friends, if you want to hear more book conversation, join me on Patreon, Substack, or both. You could join the Stacks Pack at patreon.com/thestacks, and you can subscribe to the newsletter at tracythomas.substack.com. And both of those links are right there in the episode description. All right, see y'all in the Stacks. When I started the Stacks, I learned pretty quickly that having my own business was going to involve a lot more than just reading great books and talking to my favorite authors. There were episodes to schedule, scripts to write, logos to create, social media to manage. And as you all know, my to-do list was endless. I was spending so much time sorting through all of these logistics. It was hard to find time to actually read books. When you're starting your own business, it helps to have a tool that can simplify everything so that you can focus on what actually matters most to you and your business. And that's why I want to introduce you to Shopify. Shopify makes starting your own business feel seamless with hundreds of ready-to-use templates to build your brand identity. They've got AI tools to help you write copy and enhance images. They've got built-in marketing tools to create bespoke emails and social media campaigns to reach even more people. And the best part is you can manage all of your tasks in one place, which makes your life easier and your business operate way more efficiently. Shopify is the commerce platform behind millions of businesses around the world, from household names to startups. And you know what? Now might be a perfect time for you to add your business to that list. Start your business today with the industry's best business partner, Shopify, and start hearing. Sign up for your $1 per month trial today at shopify.com/thestacks. Go to shopify.com/thestacks. That's shopify.com/thestacks. Okay, we're back. So as I mentioned, I love the book, but there's a moment in the book that for me as a reader, I was like, okay, I actually really respect this author because you ask yourself out loud in front of all of us some questions that I think sort of undermine you and your book in some ways. And to do that publicly and so straightforward, and sort of to take the questions that I think many readers might have, especially this is around TC's case, to take some of these questions and present them to us, I think shows like a level of care and bravery, and also like a really critical understanding of what's at stake here. And what you sort of do is you say to your reader, like, look, I know that some of these women who I'm corresponding with, not just the main subjects, but just in general, they could be lying to me. They could have agendas where they are trying to make themselves look good or protect themselves from, whatever, or just that they've told themselves stories over the years to allow themselves to sleep at night. And how do I, a journalist, a person who's telling these stories, like reckon with that? And in response to that, you say sort of like, also the prosecution has a story that they're telling, and like the lawyers and everybody is trying to tell a story, and everybody's trying to persuade the audience, whoever that may be, whether it's the jury or your reader or whatever, to believe their side of the story. And I just found this section to be like, I think it makes the book better, like a lot better, actually, in my opinion. Like, I think it really elevates what you've done here. But I also recognize that it's a really risky move as far as like being an authority and being in charge of these stories. So I'm wondering, was it always in there? Did you decide to add it? Was there a moment where you were like, I can't go forward with this because I feel like I don't know the truth and I don't want to move forward? What if this person's lying to me? What if I'm reporting this thing as fact and it's not fact? So talk about this section.
That's Little Foxes, I think that you're talking about. I think it's called Little Foxes.
Little Foxes.
Little Foxes. Yeah. That was definitely, I started this endeavor with such vim and vigor and such endless energy and such a like, I was so strengthened by my belief in, the righteousness of this, because I'd seen what happened with Nikki. I knew that like just factually that was so wrong. And, this was a corrective. And I also really loved like the women that were writing to me that I was talking to. I just thought they were fantastic as people, a lot of them. But the letters kept coming, and I don't know, like, there's something about reporting where sometimes you report, and if you really wanted to make life easy for yourself, you would like stop right there. Like you got a good end to that story that's fitting with everything. And if you could just stop, then you could just wrap it up neatly. But like I always keep going, and then you keep going, and you're like, oh no, oh no, I learned a new fact that completely complicates everything, and now I can't either. I have to leave it out, pretend I don't know that, or I have to confront it. And so doing this, I think there was a certain point in the reporting when, like, I'm not dealing with, people who are these elegant hostesses in like Connecticut. Like, I don't know of course, I'm dealing with a population that's incarcerated for murder. And that doesn't mean that their life was just like perfect and then something went wrong in one stroke of bad luck. It means there was a law that happened first and that they made a lot of errors. And maybe they made those errors because they had two bad choices and they picked one of those two bad choices. And their circumstances are always dire, like every single one of them. It's not that anyone is like, oh, I was, working one day at my job at, Bear Stearns, and then like things just went bad. It's just a series of bad choice after bad choice with no good choices offered.
Right.
But then a lot, from the data, I found that about 30% of the women incarcerated for murder and manslaughter were, taking actions that they need to take to survive. And I do think that's an undercount because I didn't prime people. I didn't ask them, like, were you incarcerated for taking actions to survive? But there is a significant amount of women whose victim is a child. And to really contend with what that means is to just, and I think this goes back to like the movement journalists, whatever, like if you are just approaching this from like an activist point of view, then you just have an answer for that. You just say, like, we all make mistakes, that, she couldn't help it. Like, moving on, we don't think about that. But I did think about that. I did think about what does that really mean when someone has killed a child? And some interactions that I had with women who were not honest with me, and that's not nobody that was in the book at all, but other women, it was really deflating. And I started to question, like, am I just a sucker for wanting to do this? So I went through, and I didn't ever doubt my main subjects, but I just started to think, what am I doing? Like, putting all this energy into people who, some of them, who are often, like, couldn't I put the energy into something easier to put yourself behind? But ultimately, that going through that process made me come back to where I started, which was really thinking through, like, so if you accept the truth, which is that there are a lot of people that are really complicated, that you're going to be lied to. Again, I don't feel like that with my main subjects, but like, you're not going to get ever the full truth, but not only from people in prison, but from nobody ever.
Right.
I just really worked through that for a long time myself, to be able to come back to the writing and finish it and care about it because of, and a big part of that was just coming to terms with the fact that individuals will be messy, it will not be clean, it will not be a perfect story. And that doesn't take away from the fact that the structures in place are horrific and cruel and target only specific people. And, that when I think, I talked to Tanisha and I said, like, am I naive? Have I gone in here just being sort of a fool, thinking everyone's going to be this, like, quote unquote perfect victim? And she was like, you're not naive. You're not naive. Like, and she says, there's savages everywhere. There's savages in here and there's savages out there. And really, that really helped me come to terms with, like, yes, we know our world is, and the seat of the board and the head of a company, those are all savages. And so there may be some bad people in prison, but that doesn't take away, well, I don't even want to define them as bad. Messed up people in prison doesn't take away from the larger structural issues at hand.
Right. Right. I think it's interesting because the way that you went about your survey, it sort of opens you or brings you into like very personal versions. Whereas like when you're thinking about structures and systems, it's easier to think from like further away. And so it makes sense that you would get kind of caught up in that piece of it because you're down like on the ground reporting is different than like if you're in the helicopter, right? Like it's just the scope of it, the intensity. Speaking of intensity, how were you thinking about audience?
How was I thinking about audience? I was like, sorry, like I was trying to tone it down, but I'm like, I can't tone it down. I tried and it just didn't work. And I think that it is like, it's a topic that I find a lot of resistance to when I go out with it. Like if I try to publish something, even getting people to read this book. And I think that the subject matter itself really unnerves people.
Yeah.
But there's just no way, there's just no two ways about it, that if we're writing about like sexual abuse and violence and domestic violence, I just really can't sugarcoat what happened in their lives. So, early on, I just didn't. And then when I went back, I think I tried in one draft to tone it down. And my editor was like, what, you know, you got to just tell the truth. You just have to write it.
Yeah.
And so I did. And then I was the narrator for the audiobook, and I never read my book out loud. And I was reading it, and I was like, wow, it's a lot. It's a lot for someone to take. It's very relentless, I think, in a good, really propulsive way. But like, I had this guy was my audiobook editor, and I don't think he knew anything about like any of this. He was just a dude. And he'd be like, can we take a break? Can we take a break for a minute? And I was like, no, we can keep going. And he was like, I think I just need a moment. So it is like very intense, but it mirrors the intensity of their lives.
Yeah.
And I think that I wrote for women, really. And I just thought, if women have experienced anything like this, and most women have on some very far end of the spectrum, I think they'll be able to handle it, and maybe even feel like it resonates for them.
Yeah. For my listeners, because you guys always ask me like, how intense is it? Da, 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 da. And given that, again, this is the kind of stuff that I actually like to read, because I don't know, something's wrong with me. This is an intense one. There in the beginning, even I was like, okay. But that being said, to your point, Justine, it's very propulsive. I think I was actually messaging with Roxana about it, and we were like, it's very tight. Like, it's like tense and tight, which is good. You do have to go into some pretty dark, horrifying spaces, but because the book is not that long, you're never anywhere for too long. You're never in a place where like you can't get out, which I appreciate, because for these women, they were. But I think you balance that really nicely for the reader. But it's a hard one. It's not, because sometimes people write, like you actually mentioned 2 books in this book that I read last year with the same translator. I went one this year, Giselle Pellico's book, and then also Nej Sino's book, Sad Tiger. And I would say, for people who have read those, that like the Pellico is like, it's about an intense thing, but it's actually not that intense. And then Sad Tiger is about an intense thing, and it's more intense. And I feel like there is a way to do that. Like, but I do think you sacrifice some of the importance of the story. And I think like in the case of Giselle Pellico, it was important to do that because it was for a broad audience, and like she's a figure, and people were going to be picking up the book, and you don't want people to put it down and not get to the story. And I feel like I was thinking about that a lot when you like invoked both of those books. I was like, right, they kind of do similar things in these like different ways, but they have the same translator, which I thought was fascinating.
I love that translator so
She's
much.
great.
Natasha
Lehrer.
Yeah.
She's really good.
Yeah.
But I'm also like back-to-back sexual assault.
She does all of
memoirs.
She does all of the sexual assault memoirs. Yeah, she seems to be. But I loved Sad Tiger. I mean, Sad Tiger to me was. Sad Tiger. I mean, she pulls no punches. She's just tells you about it straight.
Yeah.
I thought that.
And Sad Tiger is interesting because it's also about the relaying of these kinds of stories. Did you read the Yi-Yin Lee book, the from last year about her sons?
No, I read the article, but I didn't read the book.
The book is amazing, but I would say it's very similar to Sad Tiger in that regard, where it's like, it's about these horrible things, but it's actually really about how do we talk about horrible things in public, and how do we turn horrible things into like our own horrible things into memoir, or like into something to be consumed by people who don't know us. And like, I don't know.
Well, that was a big, I mean, that I would read, I think when you say that, I really appreciate it, because I'm such a long writer. I'm like, blah, 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 blah. And I was really conscious, that, we're competing now with social media in a way that we never have before. And I just thought about like, I really wanted it to be as tight as possible because I knew the material was difficult. I wanted you to be able to like really want to know what was next and go through it.
Mm-hmm.
So I was real. I mean, there's so much more obviously that like I could have reported on, and I was stripping out like anything extraneous because I really thought, let's get this reader in, like come into this book and like I promise you can get out of this book. You'll
Yeah.
get something from it, but also you'll be able to like. I think once you're hooked, like you have to know what happens, and it was so in terms of thinking about readers, I did think about that. I did think about like because I know for myself, I'm so easily distracted now.
Mm-hmm.
But when I get to read something good that catches me, like I've never been more grateful in my life for for an
Mm.
author giving me that because God, I want to get off my phone.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
can't do it if you're taking me on a slow meandering meditation. I just can't do it
Yeah.
anymore. So
Yeah.
I thought a lot about like giving people something to really be able to get through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about the cover and the title? How involved were you with those things? When did you know you had the title? Did you have other titles?
We never had other titles. Um, at a certain point, I was like, this is not the right title. We have to find another title. Spent forever looking for it. We could never find the other title. Like this was always it, and it remained it. I mean, we came up with every ridiculous title, and but this had been it from the beginning, and it just went back to it. But I actually think it really works.
Yeah.
I think it really works now. And you know that I won't bore anyone on self-defense law, but basically it's a sarcastic title essentially. It's a bit of a
Right.
wink, and it refers to the fact that in self-defense law, juries are asked to assess if somebody acted in self-defense according to what is called the reasonable person standard or the reasonable man standard. And it's this hypothetical standard that is very confusing. To me, it's confusing where you have to envision like this person, if the defendant, if a hypothetical reasonable person, knowing what this person knew and being in this situation, would have reasonably believed themselves to also be in imminent danger and then fought back. So that is a whole issue with self-defense law that doesn't really provide for women in domestic violence situations, but also, you know, it had been the reasonable man standard for many, many centuries, and then it was like changed to the reasonable person standard, and there has never been a reasonable woman. So the idea is that all of these women are acting so
Anyways.
unreasonably by living.
Yeah. What about the cover?
The cover was Alison Forner. I got some early covers that just weirdly had just like a lot of women in states of undress, and so
Oh.
I was puzzled. It just wasn't quite. And then we had like, yeah, it was a so Echo very kindly agreed that they would allow me to bring Alison Forner in. I love her work. She's done a lot of text heavy covers, so I knew it would be text
Okay.
heavy, and she just gave me a bunch of options. I ended up I ended up picking the one with these more psychedelic flowers on it, which was controversial in my home. They were like it wasn't the pick everyone would made, but there was something about I wanted the women represented somehow,
Hmm.
and it just sort of spoke to me at the
Do
time.
you do each of the flowers represent one of the women to you? Like, is there like like the pink one is one or like no?
Well, I think that like when I showed it to the women, everybody knew who their flower was, like right away. So who do you think is
Got it.
Tanisha?
Okay, I'm gonna say that Tanisha's the pink one in the center. I'm gonna say that. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. I feel like I could make an argument for Tanisha also being the purple one. I'm gonna. I don't. I don't know. Now I'm like I don't know. Okay,
Okay.
wait. Who do you
So
think?
I'm pretty sure that Tanisha is red, and her
Oh.
nickname is also red,
Okay.
with
Okay. I
two
didn't have
D's.
that
You didn't have
information.
that
I don't
information.
think. Okay.
TC immediately picked purple for her, which
Okay.
I think is true, and I think Gemma is the pink.
Is the pink.
And that is what they gravitated toward. So
Interesting. Okay.
I'm
Well,
not
so
sure
I'm
that,
off.
but nobody ever like nobody ever. I
Yeah.
don't think anyone ever said that, but I've always
I
been
see.
like those things. But maybe Alison Forner has a different take. I don't know.
Maybe.
Maybe
Okay. Um. Is there anything that's not in this book that you wish could have been?
no. No,
No.
I think my goal with the book, I was always just, you know, I just was very obsessed with it because I've written books before that I like after was like, I did not bring that to its full potential. Like I did not do that. And so with this, that was like one of my main goals was try to get it. Not that it's going to be the greatest book of all time, though it may well be the greatest book of all time. But no, I never like what I was like. I just need to have done this book as well as I possibly can. I just wanted to exhaust that. That was what I wanted to have after, because then you have the book forever. And if you don't do that forever, you're annoyed by, oh, I should have gotten that in, should have left that out. Like, you know.
Can I ask you with your other books, what is it that you feel like you didn't do? Like, did you know in the moment that it wasn't? No. So at the time you thought you had done, you thought you had taken it to its fullest potential?
Okay. My first book was like a co-written wine memoir with some Italian wine seller. So whatever, not my problem really, right? He like needed someone to write his memoir. My second book was about a dog in Italy. Okay. I found a dog in Italy and I wrote like a memoir and I sold it to like a decent place, but the place collapsed moments after I sold the book. So the book was published by Rodale, which does men's health books.
Oh yeah.
So I had a dog memoir being published by a health publication. So I'm not really sure what happened to that book, but my friend drew the cover and I don't know what was up. They didn't have a title even that made any sense. Nothing about that book made sense. And then my last book, yes. I mean, that book, I wrote everything you could possibly write. I don't think I got as much of a handle on the material, even though I spent years doing it. I just was like, oh, I'll write a book. Like, I didn't know I didn't have a concept in mind. And then my editor was like, looks good. And I was like, okay. This time I'm like, I don't think so. Like, I don't think so. So I think I didn't know until after that you need to, for me at least, that you need to be really, I wanted to be really unsparing. I was like, I just don't tell me that it's good. Yeah. Like don't let anything, don't push anything past. Like I will change anything.
Yeah. Okay, I just have a few more questions. Do you have a few minutes?
Of course. No, okay. I love this. This is like such a joy to me. You're like, you might have something better to do than talk to somebody who loved your book and actually understands it about your book. I'm like, I'll make the time.
Have you found that people are not understanding it? Like, have you gotten feedback where you're like, you missed it?
No, I have found that mainstream media is very, very, scared. I don't know. I can't tell you
scared of it.
Is that what it is? They're scared of it?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough pitch.
Well, I'm curious because I have found that like people get it. The internet gets it. The people who read it really connect with it. And I've only gotten that feedback. I mean, that's just, but then in terms of like anybody going there, even people who like to report on domestic violence or report on issues against women, it's almost as if there's not a space for women living on the margins with convictions, who aren't, say, an heiress or, writing a dystopian tale, but are like real women who, so that is where I find resistance. And it's not like they've read it. It's just like, give it a chance.
Well, you know what you say I think you said this in the book. Maybe you said it on the podcast. Because I read the book and then immediately listened to the podcast. Like I was like, let me just get it. Like, let me just inject all of this. I think you say it in the book, which is like, if you have to stop and sit and believe these women, what does it say about you, us as a society, et cetera? And I do think that is part of what is difficult for institutions. Correct. Or like bigger, because then, I mean, we know there's just like a lot of bad men in the world who have done bad things to women, some like horrifically bad things, and then some sort of just like, that's not great. Like the spectrum of like bad things.
Wish should not.
Like maybe don't talk to me like that. But I think, if we're talking about institutions, they're oftentimes run by bad men people who are abusive, bad people, period, people who are in service to abusive behavior. And so I think then you're asking them to, even if they wouldn't identify in that way, I think this book is sort of a confrontation in some regards to that, would be my sense as to why. And also, again, it is a tough sell. Like, it's like, do you want to sit down and read a book about like really dark shit? I say yes. And I think you, dear listeners, should say yes. I don't think you'll be mad at me when you read this book. I know you won't, but I understand why places that don't do this kind of stuff and don't feel comfortable in the darker sides of what it means to be a human, especially in America, would be like cowardly in this regard.
Yeah, but then I think, anyone who's lived anything of this is just like, oh, got it, like into it. And like the thing about the book is that, and this is not even tooting my own horn, but it is that like the women in it are so amazing. Like you will love them.
Yeah.
You will be rooting for them. And you will, I think, because this happened to me, really come out of the book. This sounds like a sales pitch. I'm not even trying to do it. But I think, readers come out of the book like the way that when I reported on the Nikki Adamando case, which is what the podcast that you listen to is about. I mean,
the podcast is called Believe Her.
So the podcast is called Believe Her. And then, my worldview turned upside down. And my worldview turned upside down again and again with this book. But I'm glad for it. Like, yeah. I think I understand things a lot more clearly. And I think that there are a lot of things that we live that we don't quite understand, like the context in which we're living. And I certainly got a lot of clarity looking at the context in which they're living for the context in which I also live, because we live in the same world as them.
Same world.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is like a real hard shift, but I have to get you on record, as I get everyone on record for some of these questions, which is, how do you like to write? How often? How many hours a day? Music or no? In your home? Out in the world? Snacks and beverages? That's important. Rituals, etc.
I'm a silent writer. I cannot have a single sound. I know that apparently there's all these writers that write with TVs on.
Yeah.
Impossible. No music, no TV, nothing.
At a desk, on a couch, in a bed?
All those things.
Okay.
Any of those things. A lot of drinks. Not alcoholic drinks, but a lot of coffee type drinks, various beverages at all times.
Can you say more about those? Like hot, cold?
Yes.
Is it
both
purchased? Is it made at home?
All. I mean, I really admire anyone who can sit down and write for hours and hours at a time. One thing that I really needed was to not have to get ready to go out, because I have children. And so a big part of me being able to do anything would be making sure I didn't have to do the morning drop off, because that would really mess up my day. Having to wash my face and put on makeup and get in clothes and walk back, that would mess up. The best thing for me would be to wake up and have coffee and go straight into writing. And so sometimes when I really needed to do something, I would leave my house and get an Airbnb and go for 5 days so that I could, and buy food that was made and just go live in this little 1-room Airbnb under some guy's house. Well, 2 men who were married. So it was very chic and stylish house. And I would go under there with all of these things and just spend 5 days, not really talking to anybody. And it was just a big part of being able to focus is no interruptions and not having to arrive in the world for anybody, and just being able to have a little bed I sat on and wrote. That was when I really needed to get stuff done. I would do that. I did it a few times actually.
What about your own mental health in writing about things that are so difficult, especially knowing the people who survived these abuses?
I mean, I have high immunity to all these things. I have very high immunity to violence and whatever. I mean, I can't watch a horror movie at all anymore.
You and I are the same.
Scared. I'm so scared. Nothing. But yes. When it comes to real life violence, I'm just sure. I just have very high immunity to it. I took a walk
Okay.
No, like I think I was just kind of like unhinged for a few years,
Yeah.
and just was like sort of unhinged. Like I didn't really do anything. I didn't like do yoga.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
probably should have done yoga and breathing, but I was just like, I'm just completely obsessed with this, like these lives. And I just
Yeah.
did it. And then I, I got burned out from it. And then
Yeah.
I came back to it and I don't feel burnt out from it anymore because I'm really like energized by their stories and I
Yeah.
just want the world to hear them. So, but yeah, no, I was
Almost
unhinged. I
everyone.
was unhinged for a while. I
Yeah.
mean, that, and maybe still am. I don't know, but like, I don't
Almost
think so.
everyone who writes books sort of that are like this, that's always their answer of like, well, I didn't do a great job.
Yeah,
And
like I went insane, but
I spent a
I'm
lot of
fine
time with
now.
my therapist
Yeah,
afterwards because I
yeah.
probably should have had some like things in practice. But I do think it's different. Like living these traumas are its own thing, but being the sort of like the sharer of someone else's story, there's like a responsibility. Like there's a lot
Yeah.
of things that are different for you, not that it's the same or like to compare, but just like it's a different level or different kind of traumatic experience in the like interpretation of the thing. Anyways, what's a word you can never spell correctly on the first try?
I'm bad at niece.
Ooh, sure. That's a
What's a
good
word you
one.
can't spell correctly on the
Oh, I
first?
can't spell anything. I always say recommendation because I have to write it a lot and I can never spell it correctly. But there's constantly words that I cannot spell correctly. That's how come I started asking this question because at a certain point, this podcast, I was like, I'm talking like in the beginning, I was just talking to my friends. And then eventually I started talking to like really fancy authors. And I was like, I can't spell anything. I'm an idiot. And I think the first person I asked it to was Jason Reynolds. And then I just started asking it to
What was his
everybody. And now
answer?
his is restaurant. There's a
Okay.
whole restaurant club. It's him.
Wow.
It's Angelina Jolie.
You talked to
Um,
her and she said
I
restaurant?
did
Oh my God.
restaurant. So did Quentin Tarantino.
What?
There's like a restaurant group of people, and Jason is in that club. Those are the three big ones that I remember. But I have a lot of trouble with multiple consonants. So like
Okay.
recommend. I can spell tomorrow, but that word comes up often. And then like sometimes it'll be like a really specific word given that person's work. I can't remember someone like I don't know. And then a lot of times like Frenchy words,
Like what?
like Renaissance or something, like
Oh, I
words that are
probably
from
can't spell Renaissance with
yeah.
the
I
first
only can
time.
thanks to Beyonce, but I think
I
if you would
don't think I
ask
have
me,
to spell it very often though. That's
well,
probably why. But
I'm
I
often
spell
talking
niece a
about
lot. I
Renaissance.
feel like I'm always like
Niece.
N-I-E and then I'm like E-I. It's E-I.
I
You
don't know.
don't
I
know.
think
You
it's
wouldn't know. You're
EI.
not the person
I
to
wouldn't
ask.
know.
Yeah.
No, I'm like a very bad speller.
It
Another word I
means
can never
nothing.
remember is Reich, like the Third Reich. But
Oh, okay.
I'm like
What do you want us
really
to be?
into World War II.
R-I-K-E?
No, I get the E and the I confused
Yeah. And
because it's German.
Ian and I are a problem.
Yeah,
Like Ian and
it's
I are, even though
it's a problem.
there's that whole thing.
But it's never every time that I need it, that thing, it's always oops, it's not. It's like I before E except after C. But then it's like, but sometimes also other words don't go in there and there's no C. And I'm just like, well,
I before
can't
E.
trust it.
Like Reich
I before
before
E.
E.
But isn't Reich
Except,
R
yeah.
E?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
See, like it's like I need it there. I need
I'm
that rhyme.
sorry.
Don't have it. And same with what is niece?
But N-E-I.
Right.
C.
But it's
Wait,
before C.
is there anyone who says I spell everything right? I don't have that issue.
So yes, there are people who are like, I'm a very good speller.
Okay.
And we usually boo them
Okay.
and then keep it moving. But also like there are some people that are good spellers. When they say that, I'm like, of course you are.
Okay.
Like I get that vibe from you. And some people are like I won my spelling bee, or they'll tell me the word that, there's all sorts of different
Rhythm
things.
was a word I lost a spelling bee on.
Rhythm is a hard one. Also, a word I can never spell that's very me is athlete.
Mm-hmm.
I add an extra E. I do like athlete instead of athlete.
I think I might personally identify as an athlete and not an athlete.
I identify as a person who can't spell it. So, okay, last few questions. What comes next for you? Do you know?
I do have another podcast that I'm finishing up. And I want to give this book the best shot it can have, through the summer. So I'm going to be just working on that. I have an article coming out in a little bit on my last piece on criminalized survival. I swear I'm not going to do anymore.
Yeah, right.
Fast forward. And then, no, I don't know. Then I have to think about what comes next. I have to figure it out.
And who's the coolest, in your opinion, person who's expressed interest in this book?
I am just a Brian Goldstone fan.
Mm-hmm.
And I did not know him before I sent him a copy of the book. And I hadn't read his book before I sent him the copy of the book because I don't like a hardcover. I like the paperback, to be honest.
I see.
And I just thought it was the best. Like, it was so amazing. So when he actually liked my book, I've been really pleased about that. So I'm going to call Brian Goldstone the coolest person.
I love this. We love Brian here.
Brian Goldstone, like, cool guy, like, really
cool
nice man, but also his book is so great, and I am thrilled that he had some nice things to say about mine. His book was like a horror book. I felt like I was in a horror movie. His book was
also intense. Your book was more intense for me.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair.
But his book was intense.
Pretty intense.
His book was the exact edge of what I can just like chill out in for years. You know, like you were saying, like you have like a high like tolerance for that stuff.
Right.
So do I. Usually I can just like Roxana's book, people are like, oh my God, how did you read that? I was like, I don't know, quickly. I liked it.
Yeah. Speaking of Natasha Lair, she did also a book called Consent. Did you read that? It's a memoir.
The Jill Cement book?
No, Jill Cement did an English Consent. There was a French translation. I'm actually, Vanessa Springora is the author. Okay. It's a memoir of like, she was, abused by another abuse memoir that Natasha Lair, but she was like abused by like a director or something when she was like in her teens as a young actress. And she wrote it and I was like, breezy, like, easy peasy, like great read. And my friend said like that she had read it and couldn't recover for, date. I was like, well, don't read Sad Tiger then. I don't think that's for you. But that I was like, this is a read,
This I can get. Yeah. I know. I generally don't trust myself unless I have like I only communicate my reaction if it's like it was hard for me because I sense that people don't have the tolerance that you and I have. But again, I can't do a horror movie either.
I can't do a horror movie. I'm so scared.
I can't do a horror book. I can't do anything scary. I can only do horrible. I can do real life horror, but I can't do fictional horror.
The Bloody Mary like messed me up for a long time. I saw like Freddy or whatever it is once, like out of the corner of my eye. I didn't recover for a long time. Yeah. But if you want to tell me about a horrible crime committed, I'm like, yes. Can I see the pictures?
I'm like, the worst things that have ever happened, I'm available, but the worst things that you imagined, not possible.
No, terrified.
For people who love this book, what are some other books that you would recommend that are in conversation?
So, I think Roxana's book, We Were Once a Family. I think Brian's book, There's No Place for Us. Of course, the greatest nonfiction book of all time, Random Family. You know who I really loved and was really influenced by was Svetlana Alexievich. Not
the
to
oral
be like,
historian.
Yeah, because she really does her own thing. Like she's not really writing journalism. She has a new take on it. She was, she uses the oral histories, but she says that they're not real. They're not false. They're just, I think they are real. And I was really inspired by that kind of freedom, like Saidiya Hartman and that idea. What I didn't do what they did, but I was really inspired by writers who didn't follow all the rules. In part because following them would have taken away from the story. Those were my idols that I was looking up to a little bit.
I love that. Last one. If you could have one person, dead or alive, read this book, who would you want it to be?
So maybe I'll regret this answer, but I don't think so. What comes to mind is that when I was in high school, and this is such a weird answer, but it is true. So when I was in high school, and I don't think he would be able to read this book, but still, I would be so amazed if he did. I was obsessed with the poet W.S. Merwin.
Okay.
And I wrote to him. I found his letter, his P.O. box in Hawaii. Okay. And I wrote him a letter telling him how much I loved his poetry. And then he wrote me a long letter back. by hand. And he said, I can tell from the way that you write that you're a person for whom poems are written. I was like 17. Can you imagine getting that from your favorite poem? And he wrote this beautiful letter to me. Like, he really sat down and wrote it by hand. And he was my idol. And I framed it and I still have it. And so I'm not sure that Unreasonable Woman would be for him. He has since passed on. But it would be pretty great to tell him,
like, I wrote this thing.
I wrote this book that I think is really important. And Mr. Merwin, thank you for your letter 5 years ago, because I am just in my mid-20s. So
yeah, obviously.
Yeah, obviously.
Justine, this was so great. Everybody at home, you can get your copy of Unreasonable Women wherever you get your books. As you heard, Justine narrates the audiobook. I have not listened to it, so I can't vouch, but you have a lovely voice, so I'm sure you did a great job. I was an off the page girly on this one, but I think however you can get to the book, however works best for you, you should do that. I think you should definitely read it. This is one of the ones that gets like the little gold star from me. So please read this book. Justine, thank you so much for being here.
It has been a true privilege. Thank you for having me on The Stacks, Tracy.
Yeah. And everyone else, we will see you in The Stacks. All right, y'all. Thank you so much for listening. And thank you again to Justine Leun for joining the show. And I'd like to say a big thank you to Lizzie Breyer-Bowman for helping to make this episode possible. Our book club pick for June is The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho, and we will discuss the book with Mary H.K. Choi on Wednesday, June 24th. If you love The Stacks and want inside access to it, head to patreon.com/The Stacks to join The Stacks pack and check out my newsletter at traceythomas.substack.com. Please take a moment right now to make sure that you are actually subscribed to this podcast wherever you are listening to this podcast. And if you are listening through Apple Podcasts or Spotify, take a moment to leave us a rating and a review. For more from The Stacks, you can follow us on social media at The Stacks Pod on Instagram, Threads, and now we're on YouTube. And you can check out our website at thestackspodcast.com. Today's episode of The Stacks was edited by Christian Duenas with production assistance from Sahara Clement. Additional support was provided by Cherie Marquez, and our theme music is from Tigirigis. The Stacks is created and produced by me, Tracy Thomas.